Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I just want to make sure if we get started.
I appreciate it.
All right, if everybody's ready, we'll call this meeting of the Lake Stevens Planning Commission to order. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. And for a roll call, I believe we are all here except for Commissioner Connor Davis. He may be joining us later. I'm not quite sure if he's going to. So could I get should we excuse him now or wait till later on? Or do you know if he can?
I don't know if he's coming. He was going to try to join, but
Why don't we wait? Why don't we wait till Commissioner reports, and if he hasn't signed in, we can do a motion that that's all right with everybody. So we'll just move forward just in case. All right. Thanks, David. I appreciate it. And then we'll move on to Judge and Councilmember Peter Shagan's also in the room. So good to have our liaison with us. And see if there's any guest business. There is no guests here live with us, but I don't know if there was anybody online that we noticed.
there is not.
There's not, so we will move on. All right, our next thing is going to be action items. We approve the April 2022 meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review. And if there's any changes, I'm going to go ahead and mention a few that I noticed off the top of my head. The first is going to be, I mentioned twice as who's here. So we had me being here more than once. Also, on the public hearing where I put 242 amendments, I pulled the second amendment, the one about the amount of people allowed at the house. So it never actually went up to the commissioners for consideration once Russ kind of said that what the real rules were. And then the other one would be at the end, there was a motion and a second for the public hearing. And the first was done by Commissioner Jennifer Davis and the second was by Commissioner Holt. They were just listed as X's on the minutes that I saw.
Okay.
And those are the changes that I've noticed. If anybody else has anything else or any objections to those. Is there anything else that I missed?
Got the ones I circled.
I move that we approve the minutes as amended. I'll second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the amendments as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That'll be a 6-0-1. All right, next we're up to discussion items. And we're gonna start with the 2022 comprehensive plan docket, focusing on land use element. And planning manager Levitan, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Chair Welch. Commissioners. So we are here tonight. This will be our first discussion of an item from the comp plan docket. As a reminder, the city can amend the comprehensive plan and implementing ordinances on an annual basis. It's then adopted as one single ordinance following a public hearing before the Planning Commission and the City Council. So what we've typically done in the past is hold periodic meetings to introduce some of the items from the comprehensive plan docket. We're going to start tonight with a pretty simple one. We're still working on this. This is the land use element. So this really regulates things like zoning. It establishes goals and policies. As has been the case in previous years, it's going to be a pretty limited update this year. We're holding off on any really major changes, especially to the goals and policies until we get into what's called the 2024 periodic update, where we do a more holistic update to the comprehensive plan. So this is really focused more on updates to demographic information, accounting for annexations, accounting for recent planning efforts such as Vision 2050, the updated county growth targets, the updated buildable lands report. So what we've done is gone through and taken a first cut at making some amendments to the land use element. That's shown as attachment 1 I believe it starts on page 7 of your packet. And so we just wanted to offer an opportunity tonight for the Planning Commission to kind of to look through the land use element to identify any additional topics that needed to be done. We plan on bringing back a more updated version of this, probably at the July meeting. That would be July 15th, where we're also going to be discussing some of the analysis that we've done for the city initiated as well as the citizen initiated map amendments. Those are both located within the 20th Street Southeast sub area, 20th Street Southeast corridor sub area. So we wanted to do kind of this initial review of kind of the kind of more text amendments to the land use element, and then come back in July in advance of the public hearings to have a second work session where we'd be introducing kind of an updated version of the land use element and also discussing our analysis of the proposed map amendments and any land use or zoning map changes that would be associated with those map amendment proposals that are on the docket. So there is a general description of some of the changes that are proposed. They're included starting on page 5 of the packet in bullet point format. So I wasn't going to go through those individually, but I'm happy to answer any questions if commissioners have gone through the land use element, which is included in attachment 1, and identified any additional topics that you feel are needed at this point. Happy to touch on those as well. So yeah, that's what I have as far as tonight.
Is there any questions from staff?
I have a quick question. It's just a minor point of clarification, but I was curious. In the introduction section, the final sentence, red line, says that Snohomish County will be considering several potential UGA expansions, including 2 that would expand the Lake Stevens UGA. And I'm just curious about where the 2 that could potentially impact us might be.
Yeah, so we had originally submitted for 4 UGA expansions as part of the 2024 docket, and Russ can speak to this as well. Those were introduced, those were considered by the Snohomish County Council. I believe it was Council Member Lowe that had revised a couple of those. And so what was actually moved forward for analysis within the 2024 County Comprehensive Plan update that was docketed as part of that 2024 update was a small portion just south of city boundaries on State Route 9. It includes kind of a commercial area, a couple of commercial businesses down there. So that would be a relatively minor expansion. And then there's a larger area that's off of Sunnyside. So kind of just north of the highway there. It extends up to, there's an existing subdivision. So I would need to look to see how many acres that is, but it was about half of what the city had requested within our UGA expansion. Kind of the revised proposal was to analyze potentially bringing in about half of that area. I believe it extends up about maybe 1/3 of a mile. Russ can speak to them probably a little bit better than I can.
No, you did a great job. So essentially, they'll be looking at the area around Sunnyside to the west of the current city limits, a portion of that where there are some existing neighborhoods that already have sewer capacity and connect to the city, the commercial area to the south. And then in addition, the city's application for what we call LS2 was docketed, and that was the small extension of the industrial area on the Machias side.
Thanks.
My question kind of parlays off of Commissioner Davis's, is that the proposed, or not the proposed, but the mandated employment needs to go from 8,000-ish to 9,000-ish. I can't find the page that has that on there. And do either of those annexations bring in commercial areas that are going to lend itself to new employment? It's always kind of a hot topic with me when we're talking about getting people employed in Lake Stevens, is where we're going to do that. And you've answered my question. So it doesn't look like one of them has any commercial and the other is going to be a small commercial. So we're still dealing with what we have to deal with today.
Correct. Yeah, that's not adding a whole lot of employment capacity. And when you annex areas in from the county that already have that commercial zoning designation, they've gone through a similar process with the county where there's basically growth targets and employment projections that would then be transferred into the city, at least for inclusion within our UGA, similar to how we already have areas of our UGA where we're planning for where we need to account for projected employment growth outside of the city, but within the UGA.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can step in here. First, sorry that I'm not there to everybody. Seeing everybody there makes me jealous, and I wish I was there with y'all. I look forward to being there in the future. But anyway, to the topic at hand, I think as far as the updates, I didn't see anything disconcerting. I always appreciate, updating the data and all those aspects of it. So I look forward to the next discussion, with the city's plans that were mentioned. I also kind of like Commissioner Huxford alluded to, I appreciate the focus on the need for job growth. Obviously with development, there's a lot of trade-offs, and I think we're seeing some of the trade-offs of a lot of the spike in the residential. So I look forward to, continuing these discussions, and not only that, but I appreciate the city's emphasis in the packet on it, because I do think, it's going to be important to get creative and find ways, to kind of shed that bedroom community and, a lot of those things that we've talked about, in order to find ways to incentivize and create job growth. So I fully support that. One question I did notice in the buildable lands table, the buildable lands on the residential side was removed. And I understand what the focus on employment and all that. But I was just curious what the reasoning for just fully removing that table was.
What page is that on?
I was page 29 of 57. Because it talks about a lot of the employment when it's added back, but I understand it might be a lower analysis now, but I was just curious if there was a thought to that, or if it was something, because I do think that's still helpful as residential development continues.
It was actually removed for a very pragmatic reason, that it's just out of date within months of publishing this. So that's why we just decided to reference the larger document, because it takes a lot of work to update this. And like I say, it's out of date as soon as we publish. So if there are questions about that, we can dig in and answer those specific, questions at that time.
Yeah, makes sense. I appreciate it.
I just had one question regarding table 2.7, which is the reasonable measures, page 32. It's pretty well populated at the beginning, but then as we get deeper into it, especially in some of these new areas, there's not much content. There's just kind of a stub of what the intent is, but not much in the way of description. Is that going to be populated as we move along?
Yeah, so that would be populated. So that was something that was kind of added in at the last minute, looking through the countywide planning policies, and we were debating. We're kind of in a situation right now where we're updating some of it as part of the annual docket, whereas there's going to be a much more thorough update as part of the 2024 periodic update. And so we thought that it was still important because the county council has updated the countywide planning policies, which include reasonable measures, which then individual jurisdictions are expected to basically adopt and implement. We thought it was important. So there are a couple areas. There was also an area one table that was highlighted in yellow that we haven't had the time to do the complete update. We knew that we were planning to bring it back later in the summer. We wanted to just kind of introduce the scope of the amendments, but as far as the reasonable measures, yeah, we need to kind of look through some of our programs a little bit more closely and populate that table.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or concerns?
No, because they asked the question. These guys actually asked the questions that I was going to ask. So
All right. Is there anything else on this one, David? When do we plan on bringing, so you plan on bringing back the land use element, right?
So we plan on bringing back the land use elements in July, our plan for the next meeting. So just a reminder, at least for the next few months, we've identified the need to hold both meetings per month. And so the plan is for the first meeting of the month to focus on code amendments. So we can get into it a little bit more in the director's report, but we'll be introducing a couple of code amendments at the June 1st meeting, I believe that would be. And then the June 15th meeting, we are planning on bringing the parks chapter, parks element. So that would be the next meeting as far as the comp plan. And we'll get into it a little bit more when we talk about the housing action plan. But one of the items that we had noted is that second meeting of the month where we focus on more comprehensive plan items, that we could also give an update on what's going on, an annual monthly update on what's going on with the housing action plan.
Okay, perfect. All right, with no other questions, we'll move on to topic B on our discussion item. That is the housing action plan.
So I'll be introducing this one as well. And this is going to be a pretty high level discussion as well. We actually just had our kickoff meeting about 3 hours ago. Russ and I met with a consultant. So the city had applied for a grant from the Department of Commerce that's basically funded, reallocated funding related to House Bill 1923, which dealt with kind of increasing housing and residential capacity. So the city applied for that grant, got a $100,000 grant from the Department of Commerce, and now has hired Burke Consulting to help us out with the development of a housing action plan. Basically, what we're looking to do, the first important component of it is doing a really thorough housing needs analysis, really assessing our needs across a variety of different housing types, across different incomes, really getting that good, accurate picture of what the housing needs in Lake Stevens are, so that we can then get into kind of combine that with a lot of public engagement to we're in the process of developing that public engagement plan with Burke. Gave them some good ideas this afternoon, and they're going to continue to develop that engagement strategy. And then really also do kind of an audit and an assessment of existing housing, city policies, city programs. We've obviously done a whole lot of work on housing over the last few years, middle housing, as far as expanding opportunities for things like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes within residential zones, bumping up maxing out our categorical exemption thresholds under SEPA to allow for more projects that don't require to go through environmental review. And so really what we see them as doing is gathering a lot of input from the community as far as what the community identifies as housing needs, really kind of what they would like to see as far as housing actions and housing strategies, combining that with the housing needs analysis that's done that really dives into the data, and then developing an action plan. And so what we're looking for tonight, there are a list of questions, I believe, on page 52 of 57. Yeah, so on page 52 of 57, we were just hoping to get a little bit of input from the Planning Commission at the very beginning of this process, specifically how involved you'd like to be in reviewing the housing action plan. As I mentioned, we've identified that second meeting of the month where we can give updates, but we'd like to know, at this point, we're not planning on the formation of an advisory committee. We think that we can utilize the Planning Commission, we can utilize the City Council, have given us really good feedback in the past. So we'd just like to know how you'd like to be involved in that process. We're in the process of identifying different groups to reach out to gather input on. So if there are any specific stakeholders, the development community, renters, a variety of different groups, making sure that we have a representative sample of Lake Stevens as far as gathering input. Would be interested in hearing any input from commissioners on that. And then, as planners, we can be guilty of maybe not producing the most digestible documents, making things maybe more complicated. So just, things that you as non-planners would like to make sure that we do to make it so that this document is accessible to the public. Ways to write it, ways to do outreach, ways to do the marketing outreach, all of that, to really make it usable and make it friendly to the public. And so those were some of the main items. I'd be happy to hear anything from Russ if he has additional ideas. And then we just really like to have a discussion about what the commission would like to see coming out of this project.
I don't have anything to add, but I will just reiterate that we did hope to just pick your collective brains tonight to find out how engaged you want to be in the process, at what stages of the process do you want to be brought in? Do you want to wait for a draft? Do you want to help with the scoping? So really, we're just looking tonight to see what your level of engagement is going to be. So love to hear from you.
Thank you. I'll open real quick on the discussion and say, I think the planning commission should be a relatively driving force when it comes to this. Since we're not going to use another group, I think having us be the main input, or not the input, but the filter between us, the city, would be the appropriate thing. That's why we're here. And I think that's would be having maybe not monthly input, but probably pretty regular inputs or updates would be good. And definitely getting the ball started. I think personally, I think would be important.
Yeah, and just I didn't mention it. It was in the staff report, but so we anticipate that this being completed by the end of May or beginning of or middle of June of 2023. We're required to adopt it by June 30th of 2023. So yeah, there would still be, even if it was every other month, there'd still be plenty of meetings. We're still anticipating about a year before adoption.
Are we worried that a year, that's a long time to have a plan for this? I mean, houses are being built pretty regularly right now. So is that almost too far ahead for, it's almost too far beyond what where input would actually be successful or
Yeah, I mean, we're wanting to have a fair amount of engagement. It takes a couple months really to do that thorough housing needs analysis, and we'd like to have a good amount of that to really paint a picture of what the needs are before we do some of our additional engagement. So there is a reason why it's a little bit, prolonged as far as the process. But we are, by the time we have that housing needs analysis done, we're going to have some pretty good data that, we're going through this process to adopt a housing action plan. It doesn't mean that if there are specific items identified that point to a policy solution at the city level, that we wouldn't be able to try to, potentially implement some of those in the interim. So there would be opportunities, depending on what we find early in the process, to still take some actions, and then they'd be incorporated into the action plan.
I agree with Chair Welch that, we're here for a reason, and especially, I don't want to say especially us, but especially us. This is a commission that is made up of a really diverse group of people that come at it from a really diverse, everybody has their areas. So when I first read the questions, my thought went back to the waterfront task force that we had combined, and some of the people there were so well spoken and well thought of, and are very thoughtful in their message. But I think that with the commission as it is, we can address all of those different niches, also inviting public. But the commission as a whole, I think it's development, long-time residency, waterfront residency, newer people to the community, people that want economic growth versus residential, and both. I think so. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and just to clarify, besides the commission, and obviously we're going to be checking in with the council as well to see how they'd like to be involved. But the commission and the council, they're two components of the public outreach. We're still proposing, to have stakeholder interviews. We're hoping to have events where we can go out and utilize things like Aquafest or the farmers market to have a booth to really, get out some of the information to, raise awareness of the project, to, alert people to the opportunities for online open houses or surveys, or, we're still developing that engagement plan. So we're still looking to have a whole lot of input. And then it's really the planning commission would kind of help to serve in that role of synthesizing some of that and really kind of digesting what we hear in the public engagement report. So
I like to make sure that we say when we do public engagement, that we also reach out to the development and real estate community, because we come up with people can come up with the greatest plan, but somebody has to build the houses. And the people who actually build the land or develop it, and really the real estate agents and professionals who actually know the market can also help out, because a great document's a great document, but if it's not practical, it's not really worth anything at that point. So I want to make sure we keep the professionals involved in our outreach.
yeah, no, we've identified that as an important stakeholder as far as the development community. And really, reiterated that with our consultant team, and really asked for, the potential opportunity to, as we move forward, and depending on, which direction it goes and what we're looking at as far as potential actions and strategies, really having kind of an economic and financial analysis component of that, kind of almost a pro forma. And so making sure that we really have that economic component as well.
When you were saying reach out, when you're saying at Aquafest, maybe at Farmers Market, is that a separate booth or part of a city? Would that just be a part of the city's, like how at Aquafest, the city normally has a booth? Would there be separate thing, or would that be part of what city already does, or we don't know yet?
Yeah, we can talk about, that's something to be discussed. What in other cities where I've worked, we've typically reserved specific times at the city booth so that we're not there all day and trying to bombard people with kind of housing topics for 8 hours. Word will get out and people will just try to avoid the city booth. So we gotta get them while we can before the word gets out there.
That's what we put at the beginning of the street.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but we can talk about the logistics a little bit more, but really we're at kind of the conceptual level, and we're wanting to, identify some of those opportunities for really high traffic events.
Thank you.
If I might add, Aquafest and the farmers market bring the same kind of crowd. And so to have those people, it may be not a good use of the city's time to be at both of those events all the time, but maybe, ask Russ Larson if you could attend Assembly of God one time, or have his congregation come, or through the associations with some of the stakeholders in the community that have already purchased, that maybe want their children to be able to purchase a home here or whatever. That might be a different conversation than those that you're having with the farmers market and the Aquafest people. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
I would concur with the other commissioners about the desire to engage on this topic pretty robustly. I think this is something that comes up, it touches our work in so many ways. So I'm very interested in kind of following it. I like the idea of getting monthly updates and engaging with the process. And I'm especially excited about the idea of having these consultants help us with public engagement. Because I feel like that's information and strategies that we can apply to other topics. It's kind of one of the eternal question. And then particularly in a post-COVID environment, having professionals help us think about strategies for reaching out and kind of thinking outside the box would be great. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and that's a big attraction as far as, having a consultant team. Burke specifically has done a number of housing action plans, and they're helping the Department of Commerce with some of the general guidance on them and rules implementation. And they've also, it's an interesting time, obviously in our current environment, and a lot of cities updated these between 2019 and 2021. So they started their outreach and then COVID hit. And so they had to kind of shift things on the fly. And so we're looking to get really some advice and some best practices from Burke, just how everyone has a different comfort level as far as being in public events, being in-person events. We want to ensure there's a a good variety of both online and in-person opportunities for engagement. And so, yeah, we're looking to, we appreciate the feedback from the commission and looking to get as much feedback as we can as we develop the scope of this.
And just to double check, so are we going to be dealing or talking or have it on our agenda once a month or twice a month?
So it would be once a month where we would check in just to give,
Okay.
like, there would be some meetings probably where it would be a very dedicated agenda item where we want specific feedback if we have, say, a draft deliverable or something like that. Whereas we kind of have a placeholder at that second meeting of the month, at least for the next few months, where we can say, this is what we've been working on. This is kind of some of the preliminary findings from the housing needs analysis. So we'll adapt to that depending on how it goes and how early or late in the stage we are.
Okay, sounds good.
I figure the first couple months are gonna be kind of slow as the process gets started and maybe get a little more ramped up. It's probably more like winter comes around.
Yeah, so I think, for the first few months, it'll probably be pretty quick check-ins. We're already going to be holding those meetings and talking about kind of comp plan related items. This is kind of comp plan adjacent. And so, yeah, I would anticipate as we get further into it, as we have that housing needs analysis to review, as we've done some of the public engagement and have some preliminary feedback, and start to do that transition into the actual development of the action plan. That's, really, I think where the planning commission is going to be especially useful.
I look forward to seeing what they do. Anybody have any other input on this process as we get started? Commissioner Cronin, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'll just be short. I mean, I agree with Chair Welch and the other commissioners. I look forward to kind of seeing it all come together. As far as, duplexes and triplexes and things like that, I think it's something, I understand it and can, provide value on. So I'm more than happy to, from the beginning of it, from the community involvement standpoint, to dedicate my time to try to, help touch as many people and get as many perspectives in there. And then hopefully it's something I can actually add value on from a, procedural standpoint as well.
Okay,
Thank you. Is there? I think we're pretty much early on this process. So I think.
Yeah, that's some really good initial feedback. That's what we were looking for. If anybody has anything else, we're happy to listen. If not, we're not expecting to finalize, that we've deliberately asked them to keep the engagement plan. They're generally pretty flexible. So if something is working or isn't working, we'll be able to adapt and change things up. And so if commissioners, think of something at, next month's meeting, or, feel free to email me and we can kind of relay that on to our consultant team. But I appreciate the initial feedback.
I'm glad we're all in agreement that we want to be one of the driving forces on this. So it's good to see, and I'm glad that the city's willing to make us a big partner in this.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I
And
agree.
for disclosure, I worked with Russ and David to pick Burke, so they're a solid group. We've used them before. I've also been reviewing many other housing proposals recently. I know they just did Battleground, and I think Parade and stuff. So they've done some of the recent cities close by. All right, with that, I'm going to move on to Commissioner's report. And
Or do you want to do,
Oh,
what
sorry.
about Connor?
I'm going to make that as part of this.
Okay, all right.
Since Commissioner Connor Davis is not here, can I get a motion to excuse him?
So move.
Second,
I've got a motion, a second to approve Commissioner Connor Davis. I'll have to say aye.
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 And then we'll move on to Commissioner's report, and I will go first with our online commissioner.
Yeah, I feel terrible out here looking at this. I miss all you guys. I have no report, but I look forward to being in the same room with everybody. And I think, having these meetings and watching it, I think there's more of a sense of community where you guys are at than where I'm at. So I look forward to seeing you all.
Thank you.
John, if it makes you feel better, this is the first time I've been in a Zoom meeting in this room, and you sound kind of like God.
Yeah.
Your very presence is felt through the room.
I better change my background.
Commissioner Dewar.
No report.
couple
Michelle.
of things. Our meeting schedule for the rest of the summer, is it going to be June 1st, the 15th, the 6th of July, July 20th, August 3rd, and August 17th? Are we having 2 meetings a month?
That was the plan. I mean, we were going to we had noticed that first meeting of July obviously is relatively close to July 4th. So we'd be interested to hear what commissioners thought about that, if there were any conflicts. We think there's enough work to hold the 2 meetings through the summer, but we're happy to, you're the commissioner, so.
And
if
then
you-
are we doing the rest of the summer as Zoom? Are we zooming the rest of the meetings because of the farmer's market?
Oh, yes.
I'll touch base on that in my report.
And then just out of curiosity, I was reading in the newspaper today that ARPA's is having something where how to spend the federal COVID dollars. And then it says District 5 is what Lake Stevens is in. And so at the Evergreen State Fair on June 9th at 6 p.m., they're having some sort of meeting. And will somebody from the city of Lake Stevens be there?
Probably not. I can touch on how we've used our ARPA funds also in my report,
Okay.
or how we're intending to use our ARPA funds.
Okay, no, that's totally fine. I just was like, oh, so are we, I started thinking, was there supposed to be a rep? Did you have to have a planning commissioner there? But it sounds like it's just for the general public. Is that correct?
This meeting is news to me, so I don't have any response.
Okay, that's fine.
I think from what I read the same thing you did. I think it looked like more like, what would the public, what would the business community say?
Okay,
Because I guess there's still, the county's gotten half of the 160 has been used, so they still have 80 to use
Okay.
up. So I think they're just looking for,
feedback.
yeah.
Okay, got it. And that was it.
Mr. Davis,
Nothing for me tonight.
Mr. Officer.
Can I ask that during the director's report, we're giving you a lot to rest to report on, but that the communication between staff and city on the short-term rental, how was that presented to them? And were the decisions that the planning commission made presented in its entirety? And the only reason I'm asking, I'm getting a lot of questions about it. I think some of the rest of us are as well. And our focus, as I understood it as a commission, is that we are trying to tie this up now with the ability to discuss in the future, but to leave it untied or to do it as on a lesser scale at this point is leaving things open to what some of the other communities in the state and beyond have done that have not worked well. So I think I at least would like to know how it was presented to council, and then any feedback that you have for us as a commission of when that's going to be decided. Thank you.
All right. And for me, I really have nothing to report except for I'll mention it now, even though we're going to do a June 1st and a June 15th meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, on the June 15th meeting, I will not be here. I'll be traveling to Nashville. So I might be able to zoom in, but I don't want to be the chair on it as a Zoom where everybody else is here. So if Vice Chair Dewar can take over that meeting, that'll be great for me if you don't mind.
Got it.
Thank you. Because even though I might be able to zoom in, I don't want to chair from doing while you guys are all here. I think that's just a weird, that'd be too awkward. So other than that, I got nothing else.
Ask Jennifer about that.
So I have nothing else after that.
All right, great. Thank you.
The director's report.
Okay, so we will start with schedule and touch on that a bit more. So as Dave mentioned, with the comp plan update and the code amendments we're working on, there will be plenty of work through the summer. Definitely want feedback from the commission on that July 6th date, if you want to hold or cancel that, just so we can plan around that. Your next several meetings would go to our public works shop. There is a meeting room in there, and the public works director has said that you could meet there as an option. There's an upstairs meeting room, so that's an option. There's not a lot of room for public in there, but there is room to meet as a group. Last night at City Council, they were talking about with new legislation and executive orders coming around related to open public meeting acts, what's next. So as of June, we have to meet in person. There is no opportunity to have entirely virtual meetings anymore. With that said, the City Council is going to continue to offer hybrid meetings where they will allow citizen participation virtually and in person. And the same goes for attendance, that they would prefer that the members attend in person if available, but it's also acceptable for individuals to participate virtually and commendable if you're on travel. I know several of the council members have done that over the last year plus. So looking for some feedback from the Planning Commission, and staff's recommendation would be that you follow the council procedures after they adopt those and continue to have the hybrid meetings, just because it's opened up a new avenue for participation that wasn't available before, and also provide some flexibility for staff and for obviously the commission. So I'll pause there and get a little bit of feedback first on July 6th, and then on the hybrid proposal. And then we can talk about our ARPA funds and the short-term rentals.
Real quick on July 6th, does anybody have a problem with meeting July 6th? The 4th is the Monday. So is anybody going to be unavailable or gone that week, since it's a short work week for some people?
I mean, I'm fine. If you guys want to meet, I'll meet, but if you don't want to meet, that's fine too.
I think I'll be here.
I'm traveling that day, but I'd have to, I mean, I don't want you to not have it on my account.
I would personally prefer, I have no plan, since it is a short week and we're already going to be off on, most of us are going to be off on that Monday. I don't see a reason not maybe to take that one off. And if there's something extra we need to do in the middle of the month, and we'll just, do whatever's got to be done there personally, just because it's already a short week. And some people might want to travel or might want to do something else. I mean, it's a little bit ahead of time, but.
No, I'm fine with that. That's
So
fine.
I find with everybody just to skip the early July. John, you got anything?
Nope, I'm flexible and everything works for me. So whatever you guys decide, I'm okay with.
So if, I think we'll just skip that the first July one, just in case anybody wants to take a long weekend or make that week a holiday. I know everybody's trying to get back into vacation modes that they never took for a couple years. So if anybody doesn't have a major heartache on that one. And then when it comes to the meeting places, I know Commissioner Holt had a question on the meeting place.
Yep, where is it? The meeting place, the public workshop, where's that?
So the public workshop is down 131st on the way to the industrial area. Can send you the address, obviously, before the next meeting, but it's just on the other side of downtown.
The one on your way to your,
It's not the one with the toy barn. It's the one down this side.
So you'll give us an address though.
Of course.
I would prefer that location other than fighting with the farmer's market.
Okay.
and was there anything else? I think Russ asked us a lot of questions that I kind of got lost on those.
Hybrid meeting schedule moving forward.
Yeah, so that's, other than that, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as hybrid meetings, as someone that's over here, not at the meeting, I think it's ran very smoothly from my side. I don't know if it's smooth to you guys, my conversation, but I fully support the flexibility and think it's a fine idea.
I like the idea of hybrid, not as much for us, but more for the public. Because I know to make it to a 6 o'clock meeting on a Wednesday in downtown Lake Stevens, it can't always be easy, especially as traffic. As someone who's worked in Seattle and Redmond and stuff, it is not easy to get back here in that amount of time if you want to provide public input. And that someone can provide public input from their house or anywhere else without worrying about their child care or something else. I think I like it better for the public. And then occasionally if we're out of town or if one of us is ill, that we can, or if our family members are, that we can be able to still do our civic duty, but it also allows the public to really become engaged, come all the way down here. They might want to have just one thing to say to us and then to have to go back and forth. I think it's great for the public here to be able to comment and move on. And it gives them that flexibility. And that's what we're here for, is the public. Personally.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Agreed.
would agree.
Agree.
All right.
Okay, great. So
Thank you.
when council adopts their procedure, we'll come back with your procedures as well, which we haven't probably looked at for a number of years. So that might be a workshop item for you anyway, to look at your rules and procedures as a commission.
Good idea.
Okay, on to the question about the American Recovery funding. So the city did get a large allocation, over $9 million. The executive team and city council have met on that several times and come up with a project list. And it includes a lot of street and road projects, sidewalk projects, park projects, as well as contributions to social services such as the food bank, et cetera. So there's been a pretty wide distribution. And then we've held some funds back in reserve at this point, just to see if any needs pop up over the next little bit. And that'll be a continuing topic with the city council, probably going back to a meeting with them in early June, talking about projects, funding, and priorities. The last question from Commissioner Huxford on short-term rentals. So at a couple of council meetings ago at a workshop, we did bring forward the briefing on the short-term rentals. We brought forward the code, the recommendation of the Planning Commission. And at that meeting, the intent was just to introduce them to the material. So it wasn't a public hearing that wouldn't have all of the same documentation that you had at your public hearing. That would come in at the next step. And several council members asked a lot of questions and have asked us to go back and provide some additional documentation. They would like to see more outreach to the short-term rental community themselves. And they had questions about the occupancy standards that you also wrestled with. And like you say, a variety of questions. So Dave and I have been working on that. We'll be going back to the city council in early June, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on the date, Dave, and sort of giving them a matrix of where we've been. So what's our current code? What was the recommendation from the Planning Commission? How do the questions the council have asked, how do those integrate into those? Also, they were briefed on the code review we did from other communities. We'll bring that back to them so they can see all of the codes that you took a look at. And then after we have that meeting with the city council, if there's still changes to be made or requested, then we'll go into a redrafting of those regulations and bring those back to council for a second review prior to going to their public hearing.
So Russ, if I may, were the letters that were sent to us sent to them in that initial briefing or not?
They were not. Again, it was just to introduce them to the code, and all of that typically follows at a hearing, a complete packet. So it wasn't necessarily when you would distribute that material.
And a follow-up question to that, is there any discussion about timing? I thought this time was of the essence somewhat on this, because as summer comes, this is going to be happening whether or not the city knows it or not. So what is happening to those folks that are doing it today? And what are we going to do once these guidelines, regulations are instilled?
So as we shared with the Planning Commission before, we are starting an outreach to all of the short-term rental operations around the lake. We've sent them an initial letter. So whether they come into compliance with today's tourist home regulations or whatever the future regulations are, they still have to have a reckoning. They're not legal conforming uses. They'll still have to come into conformity. So that doesn't change. The expediency of it is, it was a project that staff had recommended for the first half of the year. And obviously we will work at council's pleasure and want to give them good information as we do you. So our goal is to have this, I think, go to their hearing in July. And again, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong on that timeline that we had laid out.
Yeah, so the meeting that we'll be bringing it back for the initial work session is, you are correct, is June 7th. That's the council's first meeting in June. And then we'll kind of, depending on what we hear, then we'll, we're going to either make some edits to the code, depending on what we hear from council, or, it kind of depends on what the council feedback is, as far as we want to then have a second work session before we schedule that public hearing, just to make sure that the council is generally comfortable with any changes that they feel are needed to the draft language as recommended by the planning commission.
The people that wrote, and I get, I'll quit beleaguering the point, but the people that wrote into us or that came and testified for us were not Airbnb people. They were the people living next to the Airbnb people. So if you're reaching out to the Airbnb community to satisfy the commission, I think it's missing that group of people that is impacted by this already. And those are the people that I'm hearing from. It's not the people that are Airbnb their property. It's the ones that are living next to that.
I guess I'll step in on there quick. I would then advise those people, since it's now clear to us, they need to start reaching out to the council members directly themselves, because it's now cleared the commission. So they probably need to air their complaints to the.
I completely agree with you, although you know as well as I that once they talk to us, they think that they've spoken to us.
I know, that's
So-
why, trust me, I've got a lot of people, I've had a few people I've had to say, after it clears me, you need to really go
Yeah,
to the next level, because, if they really want their thing aired to them, that's where they need to go to.
I think it would behoove everybody though, if those letters were offered in the packet, because they've already been submitted to the city and they've been addressed by us. But I think that would just help the process so that everybody hears everything.
Maybe make it part of the staff reports that come from out here.
I think that that's absolutely what should be done.
I think we can share those. I mean, we did summarize them. We summarized the public feedback, the 5 people that provided testimony at your April 20th meeting. Provided a link to the YouTube video for any council members, obviously a couple. Yeah, just to provide them. And we included a link to the packet from March 16th that did have those letters in it. They just weren't included as specific attachments to the council staff report.
Is it, I'm assuming that the non-compliant properties are being identified through the apps that they advertise their service on, maybe, is that how?
Yeah, so what we did is basically, Airbnb is by far the dominant platform. There are a couple that had also advertised on VRBO and some others, but we did, Jill Needham as well as myself took a look at those, and actually, especially the ones along the waterfront, we're pretty familiar with a lot of the properties. And so we actually sent, letters to the property owners. We didn't want to do it just through the Airbnb platform. We actually sent letters directly to the property owners and let them know that we had done that. And so that just went out, I think, or maybe on Monday. I think it was scheduled to go out Friday, but I think it went out on Monday, and I have not heard my name is on it. So I anticipate that I'll start hearing from people when they get those letters. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens there, but there's also opportunities, for us, and we can, ask the council as well for us to do additional, outreach as far as getting the word out if there's concern that we're not getting an accurate representation of,
I'm wondering
where
if
people are.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, it may be too onerous, honestly, and not a good use of staff time, but if letters have gone out to the actual physical addresses, we know who lives next door. It might be, kind of what I'm thinking you're getting at is letting like a postcard to the neighbors saying, you may not be aware, but the council is reviewing this. If you have input, so I don't know if targeted to the stakeholders that are immediately around them.
Right.
Mm.
I mean, it may, like I said, it may be too much to do it that targeted, but if we have the addresses, because they're being advertised publicly, might be an option.
Better idea.
I think that's a great idea.
All right. Did anybody else have any questions on the short-term rentals for Russ, for myself? Russ, did you have anything else on the director side of things?
No, I don't tonight. Thanks.
With that, is there any other questions, comments, or concerns before we adjourn the meeting? With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Then we are adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.